Okay. Welcome, everyone. So nice to be here. So nice to be invited by Kevin to host his group this morning. My name's Greg Pergament. I'm a friend of Kevin's and a co-teacher these days with Kevin. Many of you know me. Some of you don't. I'm a person in just a little background. I'm a person in long-term recovery. Stumbled into Kevin Griffin in 2008 or so, and he came to Las Vegas to give a non-residential weekend retreat. And I was hosting that event, and we became friends. And then I went on his retreat, and everything just blossomed into this beautiful friendship and way of bringing the Dharma to people in recovery that has just been fascinating and inspiring in my personal recovery and many other people, as you all know. So I think what we'll do first is, I think he sits pretty much to begin, if I'm not mistaken, and that's more or less how I do most of the other groups that I facilitate. We sit first, and then we'll have a little bit of a Dharma talk, and then hopefully time for questions or comments at the end of that. But I'm thinking if there's anything more I want to add. I don't think so. Not at this point anyway. Maybe in the Dharma talk portion. So if you're new to meditation, I realize most of you that come here are probably regular participants, but there's a possibility. I don't have all the information. There's a possibility that there's someone here that's relatively new. So this will be somewhat guided. If you're very familiar and you don't particularly care for guided instructions, sort of let my voice drift into the background of your awareness. Right? Another excellent tip that I've been suggesting for people on Zoom is to sit sideways. I'm not going to do that because I'm leading this group. But sometimes it becomes less compelling. The screen becomes less compelling if you sit sideways. And that's been useful in many people's practice so that you don't feel like looking. Our sight is so, that's how we experience our world primarily is through our sight. And it has a lot of stuff that goes along with that. Stimulus, referencing, cataloging, all that stuff comes into it. So when we sit sideways, it minimizes that a little bit. So the suggestions are to find a posture that's upright, sometimes referred to as dignified. Right? This is, after all, a noble practice that we're endeavoring on. I know many of us have been doing this for quite some time, and it's become part of us, and we take for granted how rare it really is. This is a very rare thing we're about to do, right? And we might do it a lot. Like I said, we might do it regularly. We go on retreats and we think we know what's going to happen. But the best kept secret is we really don't know. We set up similar conditions, relative silence, quiet, and then the mind gets involved, right? So the outward external conditions might be the same, but we don't know what's been conditioning the mind. Sometimes we do know, and we sit down, close the eyes, get settled, and the mind says, I got something else to do, and it wants to entertain itself. It wants to fantasize. It wants to compare. And so we're going to work with that. We're going to work with a lot of those things, a lot of those tendencies of the mind, because that's primarily what our practice, or my practice particularly, and I'm sure many of you, has evolved into. How do we navigate the activity, the condition of the mind when we get still, like we are now, quiet, and close the eyes? I'll ring the bell once to start, and 3 times on the other side to transition out. Just taking these first few moments to listen to the bell and let that be a reminder. A reminder that the bell rises, abides for a time, and passes away. So this is a reminder. This is mindfulness of sound, right? Reminding us that all conditioned phenomena arises, abides, and passes away. This is useful information. So we settle into this body, maybe starting with a brief scan of what the body feels like in whatever posture it is we've chosen, maybe making some last minute comfort adjustments. And we talk about having a posture that's upright, but I know there's sometimes conditions that occur in the body that require someone to be a little bit more at ease, to sit differently than that. And by all means, I encourage you to do that. There are many postures we could meditate in. 4 classic, one of which is lying down. So please be gentle and kind with the body that you've shown up here today with, and attentive to the needs that may be arising with that body. So we can bring our attention to rest on some of the sensations that are present in this body. Right? The raw sensations like pressure. Gravity is holding us to our cushion, chair, bench. Maybe a sense of contact where the hands are resting in the lap. Maybe some residual tension from some exertion today or previously. And so we can just sort of scan through the body lightly and see if there's anything we can soften. Common area of habitual tension is the forehead. It's relatively easy to soften that one. We just feel it and then soften the forehead, let it relax. Likewise, the eyes, right? The soft eyes. There may be sensations in the body that you would find not quite pleasant, right? A little tension or discomfort. In this practice, we're open even to that. Somewhat counterintuitive, but in my experience, I've found that me not wanting a particular sensation to be present doesn't make it so. It just adds to the discomfort, the second arrow, if you will. So this sense of allowing that to be is a rich area of practice. So we've given ourselves instructions to be still, but what do we feel in this stillness? We feel movement. The body has to breathe. This moves the body. The ribs, the lungs expand. The ribs have to make room for the air to enter. And then the air leaves and it softens. So it's almost as if the body takes up a little bit more room in the space we're in. It expands a bit. Right? And then on the exhale, it takes up less real estate, less room. So there's this possibility of experiencing the entire body, the whole body as it breathes. Some areas it's more noticeable, like the nostrils, lower abdomen, the ribs. So when we say we're still, we're really refraining from gratuitous movement, movement just for movement's sake, the fidgeting, scratching an itch, things like that. There's actually quite a lot going on. So just like the bell, the breath arises, abides for a bit, and passes away. Also reminding us of the impermanence of conditioned phenomena. So it all comes together. All the Dharma comes together when we sit. We also sometimes bring the intention to be present. Right? And what we've just been doing, we've been noticing our present moment bodily sensations. There's other ways that the body, that we as an entity experiences whatever's happening. It's the senses. The traditional five, and then the sixth sense that we add in Buddhism, in Vipassana meditation, this knowing quality of the mind, this consciousness. So sounds arise, sometimes abide and pass away. Aromas, smell, taste, sight, eyes still seeing. For many of you, eyes are most likely closed, but they don't need to be. It's possible to practice with them open, just more challenging. But if they're closed, the eyes are still seeing. They don't stop seeing because the lids close. It just limits light, shadow. The receptors in the eyes are still active. But it's the mind where most of the quote unquote work and meditation occurs, right? When we're attentive to these aspects of the bodily experience, we're doing that in the present moment, right now. Letting go of the stories about what might be occurring, just being with this body, taking refuge in this body, expressing gratitude for this body. As far as I know, this is it. This is what we get. So why not appreciate a sense of care and kindness towards this body, no matter what parts we would prefer were different. In general, grateful that this breath is able to enter and exit this body, that we're able to breathe, that we're able to live. And we can rest in this sense of aliveness, the sense of vitality coursing through us right now in this moment. And when the mind decides that something else is more interesting, wants to compare the past, fantasize into the future, project, we gently, with great kindness, notice where it's went, where the mind's gone, wandered to, and gently redirect back to what? This refuge in this moment, in this body. No self-criticism, no judgment. This is a natural aspect of the mind. Our work is retraining and how we relate to what occurs in the mind. And we settle here. Any questions about the practice and comments? It's this was my first bell that I got many years ago, and I forgot how high it is. It's like it's kind of shocking. It's like since then I've gravitated to lower tone, and I have a preference. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it's interesting. Oh, can I find that pleasant? Yeah, I guess I can. All right. So one of the things that that's important to me in my practice and in my recovery, that's also intertwined these days, the qigong and the tai chi and all that stuff is so intertwined these days that I really see it as kind of like one thing, my practice, and keeping that all in balance. But the one thing that really enthralls me or gets me excited is how I can bring what I can do in my mundane everyday life that's useful, that's skillful. I have this life before I got into recovery, and it was not very skillful at all, and had a lot of conditioned behavior that was actually not even on a human level, some of it. So the idea of waking up and being awake and aware of my effect, the harm that I can cause or not cause, and all these types of things has been the bulk of what interests me in practice. I share this on a couple of the groups that I facilitate. When I think about some of these beautiful aspirations, if you will, in Buddhism, like enlightenment, right? Full awakening. Oh, it sounds great. I had one teacher tell me he leans towards the Mahayana ideal, right? I'm a Buddha. He told me I was a Buddha. It was shocking when he said that. He goes, there's just a bunch of stuff in the way, And I was like, oh, okay, and it's like, so that's really, and that's how I look at my recovery and, the path like that as well. It's like, okay, so you say you want peace and serenity or happiness, any of these types of things, it's not like I can say, oh, I'm going to be happy or I'm going to be peaceful or I'm going to be enlightened. And I pull these things, or I'm a Buddha, and pull these things out of the air and kind of somehow just affirm myself into them manifesting. That hasn't been my experience. It doesn't work like that. So what works for me is, and the Buddha talked a lot about this as well, what's in the way of that? What's in the way of me manifesting Buddhahood? Well, a lot of clinging. I can tell you that right off the bat, right? What's in the way of patience? Okay. What's in the way of serenity? And that's what I work on. So in that process, what crops up more often than anything else is the wanting mind. And when I was in my addiction, it was all about what I wanted, what I didn't want, and the lengths I would go to achieve that. But this is not unique just to people with the condition of substance use disorder, or if you call it addiction. It's not unique. This is common. The Buddha talked about this. It's through all human beings. It's part of our evolutionary development. Right? Back in the ancient times, it was very useful to, I want food, so I have to go get food, right? Or I don't want to get eaten by a tiger, so I have to, be aware and alert and prepare, right? Those things aren't as prevalent for most of us anyway, as they used to be, but there's still that tendency. The mind still does that. And so that's not the problem. We hear a lot in Buddhism, you hear a lot, sometimes you'll hear about desire as if it's like not good, you shouldn't have desire. Well, it's not entirely accurate in my experience, There's first of all, there's wholesome desires. I have a desire to maintain my abstinence in my recovery, right? So that's healthy. Right? I have a desire to follow a path that causes less harm to myself and other beings. That's wholesome, right? And that's a desire. So the problem is in the desire, the wanting. The problem is what happens, what we do with that, right? And this falls into the line with obsession, things like that, craving, right? There's this process that occurs in all beings, and it's very interesting, and I think it's very interesting, and it's tied in with preferences and wanting. So this is where I pay a lot of attention to that in my life, because they show up all the time, even with this bell. It's like, I caught myself thinking in my mind, I should have went out to the garage and got the other bell. Why? This bell served me fine for many years, until I got the one I liked more, I had a preference for, right? So in that instance, I realized that, because of practice and becoming aware of my preferences, like, this is fine. This is, I have a preference for the other one, but this one works just fine. One time I was leading a group and I used a water bottle because I didn't have a bell. I was in a location and forgot my bell. I used a water, it was like, dong. So that's a rich area of practice for me, and it may be for you as well. It's like, not the preferences, we're going to have them, right? Things we want, things we prefer over other things, or the flip side of that, things we don't want. I would prefer, sometimes it's big, it's huge, it's global. I would prefer world peace. I'm so delusional sometimes that I thought when COVID first happened, I really thought, after the initial shock of it, I said, this is it. This is that one thing that's going to happen, and the globe's going to unite, and we're all going to work together, and we're going to find a solution because it affects us all. It doesn't care if you're from India, Africa, Germany, China, all these places. No, that's not what happened. And I fell into a bit of a funk about it for a while, But then I realized, there's a lot of, we all have this stuff, we have this clinging, and if it's not looked at like we do in our practice and in our path, then that's what runs the show. It's like, I'm upset. They didn't have the brand of name it that you wanted in the store, or the gas price is higher than it was yesterday. It's all this stuff, and we can, when we feed into it, and aren't aware of it, and like, there's that, and you feel that tension, and we can do this in our practice, right? Because it shows up in our practice, right? We want things to be a particular way. We might want to sit longer. We want to sit shorter. Different instruction, whatever comes up, right? So there's both sides of it, because not wanting something is still wanting, right? And there's a lot of suffering that comes from me wanting things to be different than they are. It's the crux of my active addiction, I was not satisfied. It wasn't, if it was a good time, it wasn't good enough. If it was a bad time, I definitely didn't want to deal with that, right? So there was this very unsuccessful strategy of ingesting chemicals and substances to change that, and behavior, you know, it was all together in this horrible, dysfunctional, destructive cycle that I was fortunate enough to be able to get a reprieve from, you know. And what I like about Buddhism is it starts to look at these things really closely, you know, because it's set up that way. It's set up to look at what causes us suffering, this craving. So anyway, getting back to that cycle, when we come in contact with something, when a thought arises or a smell or a taste, okay, yeah, somebody wants the contact information. I'll do that at the end. Um, the mind is very quick. It had to be. It's evolution, right? Evolutionarily tied into us. It falls into the feeling tones. Well, first, before that, it's pleasant, unpleasant, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant, which is sometimes called neutral. That's it. That's the range, right? That's the categories. There's a wide range within them. There's things that are more pleasant, less pleasant, and likewise on the other end, unpleasant. And then neutral just confuses us. And I found in my experience, I very often want to put that into one of the other categories. I'm not satisfied with neutral. It's like, or I'll say things like, "Oh, I can't really feel that part of my body." I like that. I like that I can't feel that part of my body that sometimes experiences discomfort, whatever, right? So then the brain does that, right? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Then liking, not liking, or confusion, like I was kind of just talking about, right? Does it really fast. It's very difficult to intercept that process in the mind. It happens so quickly, right? But after that, that's where we get a little opportunity, because that's when we go, oh, I like that. I really like, now the craving comes. I want to have that all the time. I want to be like that all the time. I don't want to ever experience that, right? You know, and that's where the problem starts. So when we can see that, we can soften, right? And then there's attachment that comes even after that, and then the cycle is actually much longer. That's in the center of it, but that's where most of the work that I do on wanting and not wanting is in that center portion of the nidanas, the dependent origination, which I'm not going to get into because it makes my brain hurt sometimes. But that center part I can understand. I can really get with that pleasant, liking, wanting, craving, right in there in the middle. So you can do that. You can do that in your life. You can do that in your practice. You know, like, oh, maybe he fell asleep. Where's the bell? You know, the bell will ring. The bell will ring. Just back to center, and always remembering that kindness, right? And the same thing when I'm in my life and the wanting comes up. You know, Joseph Goldstein has this funny story he talks about with catalog consciousness. When he says when he makes the mistake of opening a catalog, right? He noticed the tendency, he doesn't need anything, but he's wanting to want something. And so he's looking through the catalog, right? And I said, I do that. You know, I get these crazy catalogs. I don't need any. I got everything I need, really. You know, and it's like, well, what do I want, right? Sometimes I'll put it off, you know, and then if it's strong enough, I'm like, and then sometimes I want it, and I don't, and I do it, I buy it, and then it's like it's not. It's like, oh, why did I do it? I don't really. You know, it didn't give the effect. It was really the wanting that I wanted to experience, that kind of excitement, right? So we start to notice all this stuff, you know. So it's not the preferences. Don't beat yourself up. I don't beat myself up. I heard one person was talking about, you know, but you'll hear these things, you know, like there's the sixth Zen patriarch. I think his name was Sang San. It's a Chinese name, so it's hard to. It's Tsan San, and he said The way is not difficult for those with no preferences. Excuse me? What did you just say? You know, it's like my grandson's favorite thing. When you say something that's a little off, he'll go, "What did you say, Pop Pop?" It's like, "What did you say, Zen patriarch? No preferences." Well, that sounds like it might be that enlightenment thing that's over here. You know, it's not that it's not a goal. It's, you know, what's in the way of that, right? So, okay, I got these preferences, but I don't believe it's the preferences so much as the attachment, the craving for those things when they don't occur. You know, I've had it come up in lots of different areas, you know, with food, you know, I like condiments and stuff. I'll be on retreat and usually in this one place they used to have hard boiled eggs. And I noticed I'm looking around for the hot sauce, the, you know, salt or whatever. And I'm like, and it dawned on me one time, have I ever really tasted a hard boiled egg? So when my practice when I'm on retreat is to just eat a hard boiled egg. It's like, it's fine. It tastes great, you know? So we start to push away some of the boundaries of these preferences. And what we find is there's more freedom, right? Because the preferences, when we sometimes when they can become overwhelming and you're just not happy because none of your preferences are being met. You know, you want a bigger house, you want a bigger yard, you want less yard work, you want a pool, you don't want a pool. It's you got to clean all this stuff, right? And just being with how things are helps. It helps a lot, you know. So when we're meditating, we see the arising of the wanting mind, right? And we're not trying to, because in this style of meditation, we're not trying to change so much what's occurring, but how we relate to it, right? And we see this wanting, and we just observe, right? And we see it arise, and then we see it pass away. As long as we don't feed it and create a story and, you know, extrapolate on that. So I think it's important to include desire in the field of mindfulness of what we're paying attention to, right? Whether we're being mindful in our practice, our formal practice, or informal practice off the cushion. Because when it arises unnoticed, then those habitual conditioned behaviors are going to take over. But when you notice it, then you have a possibility to lean more towards wise discernment, right? And if you want it, do it. You know, it's like, you know, provided it's not, you know, your addiction. You know, it's like, oh, I want this substance. You know, when they legalized marijuana, I was like, uh-oh, what now? That was one of the. It's like, and then I realized I really don't want marijuana. You know, I really enjoy this life of freedom and from substances and that craving and all this stuff, and even the dullness of the mind, which is why I like Buddhism. Fits so well with the recovery path because this clear mindedness is attractive to me. And I think a lot of you too, and a lot of people on this path, right? So marijuana is not it doesn't happen with that, you know. So I let go. So that when we can let go of these patterns of our conditioning, we gain a little bit of freedom, you know. But sometimes it's appropriate to act on these things, you know, these preferences, you know. I have a preference for, like I was mentioned, well, let's say good health, right? So I should probably go to the doctor regularly, you know. It's pretty cool now I'm on Medicare. They pay me to get a wellness visit. I was like, what? You sent me this little card. I'm like, that's awesome, you know. Pretty excited about getting paid to go to the doctor, you know. And then sometimes it's more skillful to see the desire. You're in that catalog and let it pass away. You know, I want a new car. The old one works just fine. Works. It's reliable. It's got four wheels. You know, it's not unattractive. Let go. You know, my truck is 2000. I have a 2008 truck. I bought it in 2010, and my stepdaughter, she said, we want to get you a new truck. Help. I guess I don't know what they were going to do, but I said, I don't want a new truck. I don't need a new truck. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and I really don't. It's fine. It serves its purpose. It's got a bed, and I can put all this stuff. So anyway, we start to work with these things, and we start to get freedom. And that's what really, in my experience, what recovery is really all about. And then in that freedom, we create the potential for greater happiness in our life. So, seeing if there's anything I wanted to mention about this other teacher had some suggestions. It's just kind of what I already said. In your daily life, watch your mind as it starts to react to not getting what it prefers and notice any clinging. These are useful things, So you can have fun with that. And then another big one for me is patience. I used to categorize myself as impatient, and what's in the way of patience? Well, it's I want things to be different, So I start to catch that more often than not. So I'll leave a little bit of time here if anybody had any comments, and or questions, and while you're doing that, I'm going to try and. Oh, I don't have.
Greg, I tried to send is your email still Wakemonk?
Yeah, WAKANMONK. Yeah.
Okay, I put it in. I composed. But do you have a way for people to send you PayPal and stuff for Donna?
Yeah, I could put that up. But if you want my links, send me an email, because I don't have the paper with the numbers written out, or I don't have them accessed on my computer. So I'm old school, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I'll get you that information. Basically, it's Thursday morning Qigong at 10 a.m., Thursday evening Desert Dharma, which is a Buddhism recovery, at 6 p.m. Pacific time. These are Pacific times. And Sunday open Sangha that's not recovery oriented, at 4:15 p.m. PST. It's an odd time, because when we were live, that's when the library that we met at, that's what they gave us, and it was easier for me to just keep it that way. So it's 4:15 to 5:15, and I can get you the Zoom links for that if you want to come join. And it's nice and small, intimate group, and we have a good time. But let me put in my PayPal real quick. And this is freely, of course, but if you're inclined, I appreciate it. I'm retired now. I don't have I do have Social Security and a few teaching gigs, but it's not like it used to be. There's PayPal, and then Venmo. The one is important on these two, because there's another Greg Pergament. He lives in Washington State, and he's an artist. And he's graciously returned a couple of Donna contributions that he received to me, which was nice. Yeah, I think that's it. Julie is a local here in Las Vegas, and that's where I'm from, by the way. I didn't mention that. And not from, that's where I live now. She put up the 4:15 one. And I'll give you that accurate information if you email me. Yeah, I'm in case you didn't notice my accent, I'm from New Jersey, Atlantic City, New Jersey. I was born. Active addiction and recovery started there. Moved to Las Vegas with 8 years clean. And I now coming up on 35 very soon. It's crazy. It sounds even weird to come out of my mouth, It's like, how did you do that? But I know how I did it, but it's a story for another time. Anyone else have a question, comment?
Well, I'll jump in. I had my hand up, but you're probably not looking at the hands that are raised. And then Jasmine's after me, Greg.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I wasn't.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for. Oh my God, the Dharma talk was just incredibly appropriate for what I'm experiencing. And I'm going to share this with the Sangha because most everybody that's in here knows me pretty well. But wow, just the way you were explaining, after I left the retreat, I was talking to you about how bad my back was, and I was really struggling during the retreat to do much of anything. And after I got back, it just kept getting worse and worse. Long story short, I went and had the MRI done, and my back's a mess. And I'm looking at possible back surgery, and I've got some seriously pinched nerves in there, and spinal stenosis and arthritis. So, got so bad that I had to confront the idea of getting something to help me with the pain, because being on blood thinners and everything, I just can't eat ibuprofens. And so I was faced with the real possibility of going back on some pain medication. And this story gets really lengthy, so I'm going to shorten it up. That I went through, I finally had a conversation with my doctor. My doctor's got it in my file that I have a substance abuse disorder. And the pain that I went through, this whole process to try to find some equanimity of taking something that would relieve my pain as opposed to not taking it, really took me down a path of so much guilt and shame that I just broke down in one of my men's group in tears. I just felt so bad and so guilty about even the idea of having to take pain medication again. But I've come full circle through self-compassion and the teachings and the training and the meditation to understand that this is something that I'm doing temporarily to get through this process until I either have to have back surgery or get the weight up. But everything you just shared in that talk was so central to what I'm experiencing right now. And I just want to thank you for that. It was a wonderful Dharma talk, and it helped me a lot just to understand what I've had to go through in the last month or two or so. But it's all coming to resolve. I've met with my doctor. Everything's going well, and I just appreciate that. So thank you, Greg.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Jasmine? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm on my iPad and I'm used to being on my phone. Like it's all over the place. The Dharma talk was very, very helpful and appropriate for me this morning. Actually, I don't really share a lot in this meeting, but what you were saying, I experienced this morning on my yoga mat. And since you have a movement practice, I was just wondering, I tend to do really well considering outside. I can, like in daily life, I can pause and preferences don't bother me or rattle me as much. But I can put myself into an advanced yoga position posture and I will, just start clinging to an easier version of it or wanting something different. I mean, and it's between my ears, right? So I kind of need, like, today was, my teacher changed it up on me today, which is why I was like, oh my gosh, the whole practice, I wanted something totally different. And what you were talking about, since I do so okay in my sitting practice of meditation and outside, but in my yoga practice, it can be a hot mess. I was just wondering if there was something that I could bring my focus to. I haven't found that yet on some of my harder postures. And is there anything besides the breath that I can steal my focus on?
Well, it sounds like you already have your own answer to me, but I've been doing some standing practice, and it's difficult. It's not painful, but it's uncomfortable holding these postures for extended period of time. So I like to go up against the edges. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to always submit to when my brain says, "Oh no, that's too hard," or "That doesn't feel good," because that's 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 old behavior for me. So I like to push against the edges a little bit. But with yoga, I don't have a lot of extensive experience. I know you have to be gentle. Sometimes you're supposed to hold the postures. I'm not that familiar enough to speak on that. But that's what I do. I go up against the edges, but not overtly so. Like one time I sat in zazen with my feet tucked under until I damaged the fascia on the top of my feet so bad I could barely walk for a couple of weeks. So I don't do that kind of extreme physical stuff anymore. Plus I'm getting older. I want to be gentle with this. I want it to last at least as long as it decides to. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I like to push against the edges, but not too much, not extreme. And David, we've gone a little bit over. I don't know how does that work, Monica? Are we okay or?
Yeah, people can drop out if
I'm
they have
trading.
to.
I'm trading. I was like working on something for you, but we do go over, and I'm happy to stay here recording, or we can stop the recording now, however you want to handle it.
I think probably we could probably stop the recording, and then I'll stay and finish up these two hands that are raised here.
All right, sounds good.